2 minutes. Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the General Committee. I would like to welcome you all here. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, members of the committee? Seeing none, Councillor Wolf, we've got the acknowledgement.
No, I don't have anything. Okay, all right. Thank you. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. We have our first presentation. Jeffney Hoos and Arand Lutzma. Sorry if I got your names wrong. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Jeff Ninos. I'm the project engineer for the Main Street Streetscaping Project. The following presentation has been prepared to provide Council with the details of the design. The scope of this project is streetscaping improvements on Main Street from Ainsley Street to Shade Street. These improvements have been prepared as per the Main Street Urban Design Guidelines. The project will also include replacement of municipal services as required. The Main Street Urban Design Guidelines were prepared by Brooke McIlroy in December 2013 and approved by Council. Detailed design of the project was awarded to IBI Group in September 2017. A project stakeholder group was formed which included the local BIA, Council, and staff from various departments. Separate stakeholder meetings were held early in 2018 to provide consultation and then notification of the proposed streetscape plan. A public information center was held at the end of May, and a presentation to the Accessibility Advisory Committee took place at the end of June. Project highlights include replacement of street lighting to provide improved sidewalk and roadway lighting. The streetlights have been selected to provide sufficient lighting and complement character of Main Street. Granite decorative pavers have been proposed adjacent to the new concrete sidewalk and in amenity spaces to add character and clearly delineate pedestrian and amenity areas. Street furniture, benches, garbage receptacles, tree grates, and bike rings will be installed to attract pedestrians and cyclists and complement the character of the downtown. Tree plantings are proposed to create a more inviting atmosphere. Underground planting sales will be utilized where feasible to optimize the growth conditions and support the growth of healthy trees. Bus stops will be upgraded to provide better accessibility, and bus shelters will be added in conjunction with works by Grand River Transit. From Ainslie to Wellington, the aspects of the project are to reflect Lower Main Street from Water Street to Ainslie Street, with exception to existing granite curb. Granite curbs are not recommended for this block due to comments received from the public and stakeholder group. Also, a cost analysis was completed and determined that standard concrete curb will offer better overall value than granite curb for this project. The following is a rendering of a proposed raised planter in front of city parking lot at 119 Main Street. This is the southwest corner of Wellington and Main. It includes an attached bench along the front of the planter. From Wellington Street to Shade Street, we have added 1.5 meter wide bike lanes in each direction, removal of parking spaces on the south side, improvements to existing Cobra Head street lighting to a decorative street light, new entrance feature for Mill Creek Trail, new downtown entrance feature at the corner of Main Street and Shade Street. The following are renderings of the described entrance features. The entrance sign to the Mill Creek Trail will also include proposed space for a separate art feature. The proposed gateway feature at this corner of Shade is to be placed behind Boulevard and sidewalk as per comments received from operations staff. Parking from Ainslie to Wellington has been maximized, but not at the expense of pedestrian space. Only one current space will be removed. The revised cross-section from Wellington Street to Shade Street has required removal of on-street parking on the south side. Although this will result in the loss of 4 existing parking spaces, this change will improve the operation of an upgraded GRT bus stop. A public open house was held at City Hall in the Bowman Room on May 29, 2018. 5 sign-ins were recorded at the PIC, 1 formal response was received. The comment was against granite curb and the addition of benches. The proposed construction schedule is April to November 2019. Pedestrian access to the downtown core will be maintained throughout construction. We will work with the residents and business owners to schedule these services during peak times and make alternative arrangements for access where possible. During the reconstruction, the road will be closed to through traffic on a block-by-block basis as the construction progresses. Local traffic and vehicle access to all properties within the construction area will be maintained as long as possible. Prior to any road closure, signs will be posted on the approaching streets advising motorists of the date and the duration of the closure. Signage will also be posted indicating that businesses are still open during construction. Key project milestones include council approval, 100% design submission in December 2018, tendering in January 2019, and construction April through November 2019. Thank you for the opportunity to present our project. Aaron Lutzma from IBI Group and I are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, members of the committee? So far, I don't see any. Oh, Councillor Liggett, could you put a mic on, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, the discussion was about areas for existing restaurants and potential restaurants. And since that meeting, I haven't had any feedback on what that's going to be. So have there been changes since our last initial meeting to accommodate for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Areas for potential restaurants?
Existing restaurants and potential. Are they going to have the space there to do outdoor patios?
Outdoor patios.
Sorry,
oh, yes.
Yes, sorry,
yes.
It wasn't clear.
No, I apologize for repeating the question. I didn't catch the outdoor patio.
I didn't say it, so it's okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the design will still accommodate the opportunity for proposed outdoor patios until there is a request from a business to implement that. We haven't included it yet in the design.
Okay, follow up? So are you going to notify the existing restaurants that they have that ability to do that? Can you do that? Can you notify them when, as this moves along further, that they'll have that opportunity should they wish?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the design is not 100% complete. It's 90. We have had communication with the BIA, but we can make contact with the current restaurants and see if there is interest to implement a outdoor patio before we complete the 100% design.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mayor Craig?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering about the opposition of the granite curbs. What is the issue there? Is there an issue, or is it just a matter of a point of taste that people don't like it?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We brought up the granite curb at the stakeholder meetings, and we brought up as a topic at the Public Information Center. The project team did not receive any positive feedback regarding the granite curb. There was limited feedback, but what we did get was negative. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we did a cost analysis, and based on that cost analysis, we determined that there was better value in standard concrete curb and gutter. Again, this project is not 100% complete, and we're not closing the door on granite curb. It's just the recommendation made by engineering staff.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Wolf?
Through you, Mr. Chair. If I recall, last time with the granite curb, that was paid for by the developer, not by the city. So unless we have a developer step forward, I could see we don't do it. My question has to do with the lights. Alex Krajewski, who's the artist on Main Street, he pointed out to me how the lights that we have on that Main Street block don't line up, and how when you look at it, it actually doesn't look as good as if the lights are parallel along. So I was just wondering, in the new configuration for the rest of the blocks, do the lights line up? Do the lampposts line up, or are they staggered?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I may actually call on our representatives from IBI Group to speak to the alignment of the street lights.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the intent is for the street lights along the back of the parking to be in a line, but in order to provide adequate lighting for the street and to meet standard requirements, some of the ones in the bump outs need to be placed closer to the road. Also, unfortunately, sometimes during construction, depending on where buried utilities like concrete encased hydro ducts or bell ducts might be, it's hard to get the streets in an exact straight line, and sometimes they have to shift slightly. I mean, we do our best during construction to line them up and make sure they look right, but there's a chance that might not happen, and for lighting levels, especially near intersections, they have to be placed in certain ways to provide adequate lighting for safety.
Okay, well, as long as, if you can try to get them as parallel as possible.
That's always a goal.
Because I was surprised, like, mind you, he's looking through the eyes of an artist, and he does streetscapes, and that's what his...
Yeah, during construction, the intent is to look down the line and try and get them to look as close as possible.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Jan Liggett?
It was more of a comment than a question. It was just to follow up on the the granite curbs. That part of the commentary and complaints that I had heard were the damage done to tires for the rock face curb sides, that they damaged the car tires.
Thank you. Councillor Montero?
The question was already answered through Councillor Liggett.
Thank you. I have no further speakers. I want to thank you for the presentation. Councillor Liggett, you've got the motion, item 8. I just wanted to say to everyone, just bear with us because our computer equipment's not working. So they're going to be telling me who the speakers are, and we're acting as quickly as we can. So you can table the motion, Councillor Liggett.
Moved by myself.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. Councillor Reid, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I want to make a comment when the motion is on the floor.
Oh, okay. We will allow you to do that. Councillor Liggett?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Devine as printed, and I'd like to comment on that. It's great to see the upper half of Main Street finally receiving attention. I think it's going to go, looking at the designs and having sat in on those meetings, I think it's going to be a great benefit to our downtown, and most likely because of the look of it is going to make people feel better about being downtown because of the visual aspects of it. So I think everybody's done a superb job of coming together and listening to the people and taking everything into consideration through this phase.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add congratulations to the design. It looks very good, and I know anyway from the Hesper Streetscaping that it does have a very positive effect upon the area. So we'll be looking forward to that happening in Galt. But I also wanted to mention that I'm very pleased that you are including the benches, because that's a part of the age-friendly city that we are trying to provide for everybody. So benches are very needed within the downtown area, so that people can stop and they can rest when they need it. And also, they're really a nice place to just sit and observe what's happening around you. So I'm very pleased the benches are there.
Councillor Devine?
Yes, through the chair. Jeff and Aaron, I'd spent a lot of time with you in the summer 2015 when you were doing the Hesper job. You two guys work real well together, by the way. But I'm hoping that we learned some things from that job. We have to try and keep as many businesses accessible once the shovels are put away at the end of the day, particularly restaurants. Make sure the holes are covered, and try and get the It's usually Doug that cuts me off. And the other thing that's very intimidating for people, if you leave, if you try and corral the equipment to a given area, because people, if you're walking by a high-ho going to the restaurant at night, that actually intimidates them. They quite often will not go in. So if you can keep that in mind. And I know it's not you directly. You're going to have to deal with the contractor, and IBI is going to have to deal with the contractor. But we need to keep it so that people can get through. Not like the disaster we had in Dixon Street in 2014. Thank you.
Councillor Montero?
Thank you. Through the chair. Jeff, just a minor question. It's regarding the benches. I don't know if you I don't know if you remember that back about a year ago or 2 years ago, we had a traffic accident where someone drove their car along Main Street, on a sidewalk along Main Street between Main and Ainsley. I think it was in the south sidewalk. And I had a couple of phone calls as to apparently the benches on that area are facing the wall, facing the stores, and not facing the street. Is the benches here going to be facing the street or facing the business, the wall?
Mr. Chair. Is this on? Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The direction of the benches is interchangeable. Our current design, for the most part, I believe, does have the benches facing the storefronts. That has been kind of the standard for how streetscape designs typically are. But That's not set in stone again. During previous streetscape design projects in Hespeler Village, we worked with BIA and collected their comments, and we rotated the benches following construction already. Or during the design process, we did that, but then again, following installation, it's the same bolt configuration. You can just undo the nuts and rotate them around. We remain flexible on the direction of the benches.
I realize that, but the thing is that they're fixed to the ground or to the sidewalk. The request was well, that happened one time, but facing the street is safer than it is to face the wall.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through our experience in the Hespeler Villa project, what we found as a best of both worlds is to have the benches against the storefront when possible, facing outward. That way you face outward and you're farther away from the road. We can look into that during when we finalize the design to see if there's opportunities to do that with the benches.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense, having them against the wall where possible. Thanks.
Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Thanks for that explanation, Jeff. As Councillor Montero has questioned, the diagram indicates that the bench is against the far end or far side of the sidewalk, and the people are looking out. And I think from a safety perspective, if your back is against the wall, you look out and you can see what's coming. That's a bit of a safety feature that people, I think and I hope, would appreciate, because when your back is against the wall and you're looking out into the road and into the traffic.
Sorry, yeah, Councillor Mann, we're debating the motion, but I will allow just a little bit of flexibility.
Thank you.
Do you need an answer? All right, Councillor Liggett, did you have anything? So I see no further speakers. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Montero, you've got item 10. I'll let you put that on the floor.
This gentleman can sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yes, thank you. It's item 10 that I pulled off the consent agenda is the Cambridge Santa Claus Parade. I was with myself, second by by Mayor Craig. Just to make a couple of comments and defer this for next year, after Christmas.
Do you have a day in particular? Or?
Well, it's I know it's not a city of Cambridge event, like we don't put it together, but the thing is I brought this up in the past about moving the Santa Claus Parade to the course, not that they were on Hespeler Road. There are some concerns, and I'd like to have more discussion on that. For this year is already too late. It's going to be on Hespeler Road, but have to have more discussion. What routes? There was different routes picked and looked at. So for next year's parade, so we'll bring it through the next new council to discuss.
We're not deferring the parade, are we?
We're not deferring the parade, no, we're deferring the motion.
Well, the chair supports the deferral, but I don't have any speakers at the moment. So you could table the deferral. Obviously, as you said, the parade will still be on Hespeler Road this year, but yeah, you could defer to the new council. If there are other options that they would like staff to have a look at, the new council can certainly do that.
That's right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to call a vote on the deferral. All those in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. So Councillor Liggett, you've got item 14.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 14, proposed guidelines for overnight sheltering bylaw on city-owned property. That council directs city staff to draft a bylaw on the proposed definitions and guidelines for camping and overnight sheltering outlined in report 18-041. In addition to, with additions of no tying off of sheltering material to park structure, benches, trees, or other vegetation, and no hanging of laundry. And if I could speak to this as well, please. I think we're going to get some blowback from the public on this. We've had a lot of complaints with regards to this problem. And I think that we need to advise the public that we are bound by the Charter of Rights in this country, and we cannot ban somebody from overnight sheltering if our community does not provide housing or sheltering for them. So what we have done is created rules that anybody who is in need of sheltering have to abide by in our parks. And there are certain areas of the community that this bylaw also prohibits this, this activity happening. The other thing is that we had talked as a council about the words code of conduct for overnight sheltering, and I'm surprised to see it in this bylaw here because staff had been directed to remove those words and phrase it in some other way. So I'm wondering if we can have that discussion now. What would we call it?
I have Councillor Devine who would like to make a comment, which I can allow him to do.
Well, I think I think we need to deal with the concern that Councillor Leggett has first, because I have other concerns. Okay, so maybe we deal with Councillor Leggett's first.
Okay, I can allow the councillors to speak to the issue that Councillor Leggett put forward before we move on. Did you want to say something, Mayor Craig? I have you down.
Yeah, I just, what's the concern, Councillor Leggett? Just want to understand what's happening here right now. What's the concern you're raising?
The concern is under a code of conduct that it gives people the impression of the fact that we are all for camping in our parks and areas, which we are not. And by creating a code of conduct, it gives that idea to people. So in discussions that we've had in the past on this, we talked about those words being removed and another phrase being used, and so staff were supposed to do that. So I'm surprised to see those words used in here.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if we can proceed in dealing with the bulk of the content of what's in front of us with the direction to staff by council next week to remove those words and come back with a better introduction phrase, whatever you want to call it. We don't have to get caught up in this tonight. I'd like to see this move forward, so that's my suggestion to council, if I may.
Councillor Leggett, would that address your
That's
concerns?
fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got Councillor Wolf who wants to make a comment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess my comment was basically that obviously they didn't find another term, and they wanted to have a set of rules, which is what we have here, for how people, if they are going to shelter overnight, what they have to abide by. And whether we call it code of conduct or we call it rules, it's basically the same thing. So that's all.
Councillor Devine?
Yes, to the chair. A couple of questions. On page 157, heading is overnight sheltering, prohibition. Okay, then it lays out overnight sheltering is prohibited in the following locations. Lays it out, so we get to Q. Parks except were permitted in unmaintained parkland. Now, I'm not quite sure what that means. I know Woodland Park that runs between Strathcona Street and Crib Street would be considered an unmaintained parkland. A few trails going through there, but it's the bulk of its bush. We have the Sheetal Woodlot that is right in the back of St. Luke's, which is an unmaintained parkland, which is owned by the city. We also have unmaintained parkland and trails owned by the city, running from Queen Street to Hammett Street, right next to the school, right next to two schools, and in between those two schools is additional unmaintained parkland. So am I to understand that with this bylaw, and I'm asking staff this, with this bylaw, that in that unmaintained parkland, people can camp there?
We could get bylaw to answer that.
I would like an answer on that, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Those are good examples of the kind of locations we had in mind when we were developing this list of prohibitions. We were trying to find a category of space where it would be suitable for people to overnight shelter, but have minimal impact on those who need the shelter and users of our facilities.
Okay, so you're telling me that it would be okay for people to camp in those spaces, is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing here?
For the purpose of this discussion, there's a distinction between overnight sheltering and camping.
Just a second. Okay, let me rephrase my question. Will people be able to overnight shelter in those locations that I just mentioned because it's unmaintained parkland?
Correct.
Well, I'm dead against this. I'm dead against it. All those places that I just mentioned, people's homes back onto those, schools back onto those.
All right, this is out of hand.
Yeah. So Councillor Devine, you got your answer.
Okay.
Do you want to make some comments towards the debate?
We have a staff member standing up here, shouldn't be yelled at.
Right.
Oh,
So yeah, Councillor Devine, you can comment on it around the horseshoe, but we're going to leave staff out of it because they have their own professional opinion.
Okay, let me carry on.
I'll let you continue to talk though, like to share your opinion on the matter.
Okay, those three places I mentioned, they all back onto, one of them backs onto a senior's property, two of them back onto two schools, as well as backing onto abutting single-family homes. I can't fathom how we can have people overnight camping, allowing people to overnight camp in these locations. What we're going to set up in this city is nothing more than a free-for-all, in my opinion. Nothing more than absolute free-fall. We need deferral till we find out where we're at here, and not until next week, the next general committee meeting, because this is very serious, and that's only three that come off the top of my head. We go around the rest of the city, we can find lots of. We're fortunate to have a lot of unmaintained parkland and bushes that the city owns here in Cambridge. So I'm asking for deferral on this. I can't agree with this. I can't agree with it at all.
Councillor Montero?
I can sympathize with Councillor Devine is saying, but the thing is, this is not a set of rules. This is the court's decision with the human rights. They made that decision. We have no control of this. The thing is, maybe we'll have Kelly explain what the decision of the courts were, so everybody is playing in the same, so we know what we're talking about. This is not the rules made by our staff. These are the findings of the court that under the human rights. So if I could have an explanation from somebody, so we all know what we're talking about.
We'll get Nadia to explain. Nadia.
Same thing.
Good evening. Good evening. Yes, Councillor, you're quite right. The British Columbia Court of Appeal, in the Adams decision, subsequently adopted by the courts here in Ontario, indicates exactly what you have indicated. That is, where there is an inadequate amount of shelter for homeless people in the community, public lands are available to them for overnight sheltering. This doesn't mean that the municipality is prevented from regulating the lands which are available for that purpose, which is what the report that's before you today tries to do. And as I think Brian indicated to you, the areas that we have suggested are areas where there could be some availability for homeless people to have the limited opportunity to come at dusk and stay until dawn under the supervision of the Department of the Parks, Recreation and Culture Department and the group that Brian supervises for the purposes of monitoring this activity. So I think one needs to bear in mind that this is not a free-for-all. These individuals will have the opportunity for a very limited overnight stay under a substantial amount of guidelines for their behavior. Doesn't have to be called a code of conduct. We're quite happy to use any other phrase that the council considers appropriate. It is not a free-for-all. They're required to abide by these rules. If they do not abide by these rules, the bylaw permits the staff to remove them. And Brian is there. His ambassador team is already working. These are practical rules which they are currently already using. And what will happen is that in the future, this opportunity for homeless people to have some form of shelter will be monitored. And it is not intended either by Brian's group, by the bylaw group, or the legal services group that it becomes some kind of free-for-all on public lands.
Did he want me? I can't hear you.
Right, but no, Councillor Montero had asked the question, and he still has the floor. I'll allow a follow-up question, but we are going to keep this moving.
Yeah, just for clarification, Nadia, can you explain to us then, okay, let's use High Park, the closest park we have, City Hall. If someone, a homeless person, sets up shop overnight, what I mean by just overnight, do we have the authority, I'm talking overnight, and does it have legs for us to charge that person for setting up shop during the night for one night or 2 nights during the night hours?
The enforcement mechanism that the bylaw contemplates is that he would be asked to leave. What you want is an immediate response when that person is there and not complying with the rules of behavior is that he has to go.
Exactly. What if he doesn't?
In that case, you call the police because it's trespass.
And does it have legs to stand in court?
Yes, it does have legs to stand in court. Yes, the bylaw would stand up in court in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I spent about 2 hours today at the food bank, and this topic came up. And we talked about our homeless. And I really have to congratulate our self-help food bank because they know who the homeless are. They know their names. They know where they are. And they are there to help them in whatever way they can. We have to remember, these are homeless people. They are not criminals. I think we're letting ourselves be guided by fear, and fear doesn't accomplish anything. We need to understand that these are people who need some kind of shelter, and they live in Canada where we say, we're going to look after you. We're going to make sure that you have some way that you can spend a night reasonably. And so this is what this is about, is trying to help, not harm and not put pressure on people. And that we have street workers who go out there and they watch and they help. They make sure that they're all right. They make sure that if they're sick, they get help. They make sure they don't get frostbite. And all of these things are happening. And so they're going to be somewhere. What we are doing here is allowing them to be in a space where they will be looked after in some fashion, and that we know exactly where they are. I don't know, I feel really badly. I mean, words are important. Words are really important as to how we express ourselves and how we view things. And I don't want to be ashamed of the council and saying that we don't want to help people who are homeless. It's our responsibility to help. It's our responsibility to provide for these people. And we have to step up and do whatever it is that we can do in order to ensure that they have shelter for a night. I know, and everyone around here I know wants people to be housed, but right now we don't have that. If we had it, it would be wonderful, but we don't. We have to move towards it as quickly as we can, but until we have a place for everyone, then we need to have this in place so that overnight sheltering is allowed, and it's allowed with supports and help from this community.
Mayor Craig?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, just a question. If we're saying we're not going to allow homeless people in our parks except unmaintained parks, can we actually direct people once we see them setting up in a park, say, no, you can't be here, you have to move over there? Is that what we're saying here, so I understand it?
Nadia? Or?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks.
That is correct. So currently we have a number of people living outdoors. Oftentimes they choose a park space to stay. We encourage them to stay, off the sports field, off the playground, into an area that's more out of the way. And this formalizes.
So we're going to direct them, are we?
Yes. Right now there is no
rules,
official direction on what to do.
I just want to clarify that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Liggett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think any of us need to be ashamed of each other and any of the comments that have been made tonight. I think we all have concerns for our particular wards. Nobody here has said anything about not allowing overnight sheltering. It is temporary. It is only until the region and the province and the federal government do take on their own responsibility and provide housing for people. And I think what's missing from this report is the next phase of that, where we should be pushing and lobbying them strongly to provide that. So that, we should never have gotten to the point where we have to make up guidelines and rules. It seems like we're getting taking on the responsibility that other levels of government should be doing. So I think we need to keep in mind the words here are written as temporary shelters, and we have to make sure that it doesn't become permanent homes for people, because that doesn't allow for the quality of life that some should be able to have. In the door knocking that I've been doing, I actually ran into a woman who had been removed from her home regional housing because she had been in a 2-bedroom home, and her daughter had become of age where she left, and rather than providing a 1-bedroom for her and putting her to the top of the waiting list, she had been removed from regional housing, and she couldn't find anything that she could afford. So she went to the Bridges. She was there for 6 days, 5 nights, and she felt very unsafe, so she ended up sleeping in Riverside Park. She now has a room in a rooming house. But that's the kind of thing that should be considered temporary shelter. And I'm appalled at the fact that other levels of government have turned a blind eye all these years to the growing homeless in this country. And I feel bad and sick that we have to get to this point where we have to provide for them in areas that they shouldn't have to live. So I also think that this is a bit too open-ended, that we as council, as well as our staff, should know which unmaintained parkland is being discussed. And I'd like to have that for the next meeting.
Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. You know, there's been a lot of good comments around the floor tonight, and this level of government is probably the most caring and the most closely associated with our constituents, and we see what happens in our community, and it hurts us when we see it. And people need shelter and care, and we want to provide it, and we wish we had enough shelter for everyone. The one thing I look at in this recommendation is that we identify all the areas where it's prohibited. And instead of saying, you can't, you can't, you can't, is there somewhere where we could say, you can here? So that we could identify where you could shelter, instead of saying, you can't in all these areas, and there's about 10 or 20 that we list. If we only listed 2 or 3 where you could, then people would have an idea where they could shelter overnight, instead of having to consider the list of all the areas where I can't. It's a whole lot easier to say, here's where you can. So I would just throw that out on the floor and ask that that be considered for the next meeting as well.
Councillor Devine?
Yes, I don't think it's a situation where that the city, or the people of the city, are not caring. We have to represent everybody in this city. We have to represent the taxpayers. We have to represent the homeless. And we've always been a very, very caring community. But the way this is written, it leaves a very broad definition there. And as Councillor Mann had said, Councillor Leggett had said, we need it defined on where they can go, specific locations. Specific locations. In consultation with the residents of those areas. There needs to be a public meeting on this. Now, the other thing that I'm afraid of, because it's no secret, we have a lot of people living and camping outside. They're not from Cambridge. We have a lot. For whatever reason, they migrated here, for whatever stories they might have heard. And I'm very afraid that we pass this as it's written. We just could have a real influx into this community, more than we've had. So we have to deal with some reality here. This bylaw is too open, it's too vague. It needs to be more defined. And I believe it should be deferred, and I'm making a motion for deferral till we can get those answers. And we won't be getting them by next week.
Dave Bush would like to make a comment. Can I get it turned on?
Hey, do you want to come over and use this one?
There we go.
Yeah.
We have light. Thank you. Through the chair. I can appreciate the emotion that's in council tonight with this report. This is the initial follow-up from direction of council in August. So with that, we put a team of professionals together to try and determine 2 objectives. One, defining encampments and settlements, and 2, putting guidelines to that. That was direction from council. It's an evolving process because it's certainly uncharted ground. So we are diligently working on defining what will work for our community. We also have 4 more objectives after that. So the work is not done. This is an evolution. So the feedback we've taken tonight, or we've heard tonight, we can certainly make the suggested amendments. That's not a problem. We can certainly have further discussion on intent and any additions that we've noted here tonight. So the objectives, we still have public safety, improved outreach, increased coordination, in-term and long-term measures. So there's 4 more objectives to the first 2. So it's an evolution to try and address the ongoing problems in the community right now.
Let them speak first. I could go back to you on that. Councillor Montero?
Thank you. And it's just a comment. I don't think anything was said here tonight that we are against or for this. We have a crisis in our hands, and we try to find a solution to this. The thing is we cannot also just concentrate on homeless alone. We have a community, the community as a whole. There's people that have that walk the streets, that walk the parks, that go places. That we live all here. We have to look at them also. This affects their way of life. So we have to be conscious of both sides, not just one side. We're trying to come up with a solution for this, and this has got to the point that, how are we going to manage this? Like homeless been around forever. I remember before Bridges was around, we used to pick up people on the street, the police, and take them to the police station and put them in cells so they could get out of the cold. This has been going on forever. But the amounts, the numbers now are, well, we all see it. So I don't want people to think that we're not thinking of them. Yes, we wish we had an answer, a place to put them, affordable housing for them to go to live. But I didn't hear anything here tonight that it was offensive to anyone. I just want to clarify that.
Councillor Wolf?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think that if we tried to have a public meeting to find a specific area where we were going to tell people to overnight shelter, we would divide our community. I think we would definitely see, not in my backyard. I think the way the motion is written, and staff, the ambassador group, etc., can suggest to people where maybe in a more appropriate place for them to be is maybe a good thing. Also, it's cold and wet out there. We don't have any more time to put this off. So I think the Code of Conduct rules, whatever we have here, are needed now, not later. We can, as Mr. Bush said, we're looking at public safety, we're looking at other objectives along with this. So this is an evolving document, so I think it would be good to let it evolve. We do need to concentrate on other things as well. I too was at the food bank today sorting food and discussing the needs. We only have 2 outreach workers at the food bank. That's one thing they said they need at least 2 more because they have to go out in pairs. And especially with the bad weather coming, we need people to try to reach the people who are living outside and encourage them to seek safer shelter. We're also in the need of some sort of drop-in center during the day. At the food bank, they used to have a coffee house, but they don't have staff to staff it, other than, let's say, I think a Thursday afternoon. So there's certain needs that maybe we can step up and try to help fill. In the meantime, we know we're working on affordable housing, and those are great things. We have the incentive package that the city has led the way in Ontario, and we need to perhaps market that to encourage some more private developers to step up. But anyway, I think if we looked at this, what we are looking at tonight, as an evolving document, and I think it would be wise to pass it tonight and let staff work with this document and then come back and tell us what more we need to add to it or if it's working.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you. I would support what Councillor Wolf has said. I think we do need to deal with this initial part tonight because of the issue of the weather becoming more difficult for people. And but the other thing I would like to have happen is that the food bank and Lutherwood, because Lutherwood also has outreach workers, be involved in the discussions as we go forward and look at all of the other objectives, because they have a lot of experiences that I think might be very helpful to us, and as we grapple with how we're going to deal with all of these issues. So I would like to see them involved in any future endeavors.
Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The cold and the wet won't increase the numbers or make an emergency any more of an emergency. It actually, cold and wet tends to decrease the numbers as they look for inner shelter. I'm supportive of Councillor Devine's request to defer this until we get more details on what unmaintained parkland is necessary to be used. And I agree that with Councillor Montero's thinking that we're opening ourselves up to an influx from people from outside of our community as soon as they hear that we are, or Councillor Devine, as soon as they hear that we are open for business when it comes to our parks being used for the homeless. And I don't mean the words open for business in a negative manner. It's just I'm not thinking quick enough on the right term that I'm searching for in my head. And I understand that this is to be done in phases, but this part here is part of the first phase. It's not part of the next phases. So until we get this detailed out and laid out, I would support that deferral, because it still will happen in time for winter. It still will happen for the people that are in the parks right now. It's no different than what we have done all summer, so we're only looking at another month before this would take place.
Mayor Craig?
Well, I think between now and council next week, I think we should give staff the opportunity to answer the issues that have been raised. If, in fact, people aren't satisfied at that point, then make the deferral. I think that would be a better way of handling it. I'd like to move on with this document. I think we have to respond in some constructive way to the issues that we're living with in the community. They're very unsettling for us and for everybody in the community, because we haven't been down this road before. But I think we need to be careful of a lot of things. I'll leave it at that, but I think the council table is the place to defer it if, in fact, staff come back and they don't have all the issues laid out for us that people are concerned about.
Hardy would like to say something?
Maybe just to help council and their debate around the horseshoe. The recommendation from staff is actually simply to provide a draft bylaw for your consideration. And so some of the discussion and debates that have occurred here tonight may be more appropriate when you actually look at a draft bylaw. And I think with the number of comments that we've had, we can incorporate that into a draft for your consideration. So I'll throw that out there for your thought process.
Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my comments were going to be similar. That is a deferral necessary with all the comments and the feedback that has been provided tonight. If staff are going to bring something back, a draft back next week, that we can review, and we could look at it at that time and say, it is good enough, or it meets the needs that we've identified, or we need to defer it at that time. So I would be happy to see us move ahead with this too. Staff have a lot of suggestions that have been made this evening, and they can include those in the draft bylaw that comes back to us, and then we could look at where we go from there.
So I had mentioned I would give Councillor Devine the opportunity to put forward a deferral if that's what he wanted. Now, Mayor Craig did put forward a good suggestion about deferring it till next week, and then if you have additional questions, you could do it beyond that. But I'll let you table it, and then we'll vote on it, and depending how that goes. Oh, Councillor Devine?
I'll withdraw the deferral because we can still defer it next week. Because what I see here, it's not palatable for our community at this time. It's too open-ended. It's just any unmaintained parkland, you can go spend the night, 12 months of the year. So we have to get a list and we get a grip on it. And to be quite honest with you, as it's written now, I'm not in favor at all, not one bit. To the point where I could even vote to turn it down tonight.
So we'll just send it to council next week. We'll just take a vote on that. All those in favor? There is. Oh, but did you say you wanted to defer it until council? Okay.
The motion is...
Well, then I'll call the question on the main motion. All those in favor? So, Councillor Devine, you've got the consent. I will allow you to put that on the floor.
Consent agenda is printed, seconded by Councillor Leggett.
All those in favor? Carried. So I just want to draw to your attention the correspondence. We have something from the Cambridge Accessibility Advisory Committee regarding snow removal. We also have something from the town of Wabana regarding Bell Island Smoke Alarm Program. So you may read that, or you probably already have. Are there any non-jurisdictional items? Sorry, Councillor Devine, did you have something to say?
Yes, the correspondence from the Cambridge Accessibility Advisory Committee. We had quite a discussion on that. Please, everybody, have a look on it. Have a look at it, because there's some pretty tough issues with sidewalks in the winter that we're going to have a good, long, hard look at. And is it safe to assume this is going to be recorded in the minutes?
We can do that.
Please, thank you.
You're welcome. Any non-jurisdictional items or other business? Anyone? Well, I have something quick to mention under other business. It's very quick. So I do applaud staff for doing the traffic calming review along the major roads like Avenue Road and Queen Street. I've received a lot of positive feedback from the residents on that. I was also doing some reading this week about what the City of Ottawa is doing. They're experimenting with 3D crosswalks and 3D speed bumps, not actual ones, but they're kind of like an optical illusion, and they're doing a pilot program. So I was just wanted to refer that to staff, if maybe they could just stay in contact with the City of Ottawa and just ask them how that's progressing. I mean, we don't need to do a pilot program here. We can learn off each other, and I'm sure we can share our experiences as well. So that was just something I wanted to mention. Are there any committee updates? Councillor Mann, you've got the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Shannon Adshade, that we adjourn now at 8:03 p.m.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.